Welcome to the New Heights Show on Education. I'm Pamela Clark, founder and director of the New Heights Educational Group, and I'm here with David Smith, the founder of Silicon Valley High School, who has helped us get these podcasts produced and delivered to you.
Yes, Pamela, when we saw the great things that you and your army of volunteers were achieving at New Heights, we wanted to get involved. We're happy to work with you to leverage the internet and make quality education accessible and affordable to everyone, everywhere.
Thank you, David. We appreciate Silicon Valley High School helping us to get these podcasts out to the hundreds of thousands of listeners from all over the world. So I hope you enjoy the show.
In this week's episode, we will discuss education reform on mission.
Hello, everyone. This is Danielle Washington coming to you live from Ms. Buffy Williams' office. Just sitting around thinking about life and trying to become better people tonight, so check us out. Welcome back. You're on the air with Buffy Williams, and you have been listening to the New Heights Show on Education. We have been discussing the show's purpose on mission.
Good evening. This is your host, Buffy Williams, and you're listening to the New Heights Educational Group, the New Heights Show on Education. And tonight's topic is classroom sizes in K-12. Does it work? Or does it even matter? A recap on last week's show, we took a look into the different forms of media used in the classroom learning environment. On tonight's episode, we're going to talk a little about the classroom size, and the topic has been a hot button issue for a number of years now. So join us in the discussion and call us at 917-948-7542 or drop your comments in the chat or tag us on social media using the hashtag NHEG, or as always, post your comments on Twitter at Buffy_Awaken or on Spreaker, Instagram, or YouTube. Remember, my fellow New Heights host Erica Hanson's show airs on Thursdays at 2 o'clock p.m. Mountain Standard Time, 1 o'clock p.m. Pacific Standard Time, and 4 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. On this week's episode, I know that last week I told you we were going to be doing the issue 4 of the Easy Tunes comic book. But in light of COVID-19 and thinking about how classrooms will be structured as we go into the fall of next year, I thought that we would talk a little about classroom sizes. And this issue of classroom sizes has been up for debate as to whether or not it's been effective. And so our source for tonight's show is the Education Research Center, Education Week, and the Department of Education. And when we're looking at classroom settings and classroom size limits, there are a number of factors that researchers have found that are instrumental in whether or not classroom sizes matter. I know that we have, myths, but then there are always the realities after the researchers do the research as to whether our myths are actually true. So let's talk a little bit about that tonight. One of the things is that teachers on average have in the U.S. about 25 students per classroom. And so one of the other things that researchers have noticed is that the classroom size reduction generally does not make a difference in the academics of a student after they are in high school. But it does make a difference if the students are in the lower grades. And so what they're looking at there is that there's this continual reoccurrence of this issue of classroom sizes and reduction of sizes and what kind of implementation and strategy should be used within the classroom. But more importantly, teachers are at the forefront of this. So teachers are looking at instructional time and how much time they can actually spend with each student. And we know that all those things are factors, and policymakers and researchers have been exploring this issue and the reduction of classroom sizes and looking at what methods they favor over other methods. And so in looking at the restructuring and the formatting, one of the things that they have considered is actually co-teaching, which allows two teachers to be in the classroom, which of course gives the students more opportunity and more access to teachers, but also the research shows that just because there are two teachers in the classroom doesn't necessarily mean that the students will actually retain more or learn more or even get more attention. So another way that they have looked at mitigating the classroom sizes is distance learning, adding to the instructional time for the students. And so that's another factor. And schools have been challenged with this, and I think it was around 2000, we had the No Child Left Behind, 2000 or 2001. And as a result of that, the federal government issued a lot of block grants, and the estimated value of that was $2.85 billion for block grants for school districts to hire more teachers. But in that mass effort to take advantage of those block grants and to actually place more students or place more teachers in the classroom for the students, one of the issues that they found was that once they received the block grant, they didn't actually have the classroom size to or the structure in the school to be able to actually lower the classroom sizes. So then they found that they had facility issues, and they also were in such a mass rush to hire teachers that they hired a lot of teachers that were not highly qualified or not certified within that particular area. So just because the school districts had the funds, they weren't necessarily able to implement the program in the most effective way because they had to a lot of the schools had to add actual portable schools on the children's playgrounds in order to add additional classroom space. And they were even using broom closets that were a large size to actually try to expand the classroom sizes or the classroom locations for the schools. And so those are some of the issues that school districts have faced throughout the years. But in 2008, the classroom size did kind of trickle down from the average of 25 to from 17 to about 15 during that mass push of the block grants. So it was a reduction of maybe 2 to 3 per classroom. But another thing is that you have to look at how is your school district actually counting that ratio. And so if they're saying that they have a particular classroom size, then are they factoring that by the average number of students at the school divided by the number of teachers that they have? Or are they actually just doing it on average? So you have to look at everything in the statistics because it could be skewed data because they also factor in teachers that have special education classes, which are naturally lower in number, but they're not necessarily teaching the other students in the school. And so in that way, you may have a false sense that you have a larger number of teachers in a particular school teaching a smaller number of students, but in actuality, there's still a large number of teachers that have larger classroom sizes and very few with the special education classes who actually have fewer students. And so those estimates did come from the Department of Education. So if you want to look those statistics up, that is out there for you as well. And so also to try to mitigate this, the federal government instituted a few things, or states issued a few statutes that actually kind of impacted the school districts in a different way. And so they mandated that there was a restriction on classroom sizes in the general education classrooms of the earlier grades. And so that would be like pre-K through third grade, but they weren't necessarily in the higher grades up. And so, again, we're talking about whether or not the myths and the realities of reducing class sizes actually make sense if it's going to improve academic achievement for our students, and if they're going to glean anything from that. And there can be a number of different factors here. And so, we can say there's an issue and we need to try to create a solution. But if researchers have already done the research and they say that it's not going to increase the actual performance of the student, then maybe we need to look at something else as far as the structure of classroom sizes. And so one of the things that the researchers had noted, which I thought was very interesting, and I think that this also gained some traction around 2008, is that they considered extending the length of the school day. And so they thought that that may actually increase the academics performance of the students versus actually having smaller class sizes, which really didn't show a significant change in student improvement. And so that's one of the other things that we needed to consider. And so in looking at reducing the classroom size, one of the things that the research noted is that when you did reduce the classroom size in the earlier grades, that minorities and immigrants tend to perform better in those grade levels. But then they were looking at class sizes in that particular study of 13 students per class versus 17 students per class. And then after they reached 4th or 5th grade, they went to standard school sizes, standard size for the classrooms, and they noticed that there was an increase in those particular students in that particular study, in that group. And so the outcome of those academics may or may not increase based on the students' actual initial interaction within the school system. And so the best way, I think that this is one of the other pushes for pre-K, having pre-K programs and then having actually smaller class sizes to increase the performance of, as we've talked about many times before, the Higher Education Act, and implementing those programs because they knew, or they assumed at that point, because I don't think all of the research had been done, but some of the earlier studies said that early exposure kind of created a discipline. And so once you've done that, even though you reduce the class sizes, once they get to high school, it doesn't necessarily mean that they will be able to catch up from that or change their behaviors. And so we have to look at all the factors that go into whether or not this problem is a problem or if it's an issue that's something that we can solve. And so we know that it doesn't automatically change, the teaching practices of the teacher either. So those are other factors that we have to actually keep into play, because you have multiple variables that will affect whether or not a student's performance is going to be on par. And so you look at whether or not schools were forced to hire teachers who were not qualified or underqualified, or teachers who were unprepared to actually deal with the particular group of students that they were dealing with. And also another factor is that if you have a classroom size, let's say of 25 students, and you're an English teacher, and they're actually preparing research versus a math teacher, let's say, or a teacher that does not have as in-depth grading systems versus someone who's teaching art, those core areas are going to be, of course, heavier in course material usually than, let's say, an art class. And so with that, just because you reduce the class size does not mean that the teacher actually still has time to do all the things that they need to do within the classroom in order to make that a productive and nurturing environment for that student, and actually give that student the time that they need in order to increase their instructional time with that student one-on-one. And so in Japan, they found that Japan and Korea, they found that the class sizes average 33 students to 36 students per class, and the academics were still on a higher